Hi, I'm Jesse Miles, and I want to help you create the freedom to pursue your own great adventure. I wanted to tell you the story of selling a successful business to try to become a rock star. So my first successful business was called Noodle Heaven, and it was a food cart, catering, and events business. I built the food cart in my dad's backyard when I was 21 during my last term of college. I was going to school full-time, building a food cart, and I was working at a brewery as a cook. So I opened the food cart the same week I turned 22 and graduated college. And I ran the food cart for 3 years. And the best part about the food cart was that it was a seasonal business. I would run it from May to October, about 7 months, and I would just work super hard. I would work 6 or 7 days a week. I would work 50, maybe 60-hour weeks. And if we had a catering or an event, I would work maybe 40 hours in 3 days. Because if the food cart's at an event, there's so much money to be made. You want to capture every hour and capture every dollar. So you just live there for 3 days. You go home and sleep, back to the event, sleep, back to the event. That's it. So I worked hard 7 months of the year, and then I would go travel. I'd pack it up in October and I'd go travel the world. I'd fly to South America or Asia or Europe, and I would just travel until I came back and opened it again. And I remember telling one of my customers about what my year looked like, and they were like, "You've got the perfect gig. This is like the perfect business. You work half the year and travel the other half of the year? Dude, that's the dream." And I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. So why did I sell it? Why did I sell it to buy a tour van to go become a rock star, or try to? I sold it because music was becoming more and more of my focus, and I was finding myself less and less interested in food in general, but also in my food cart catering events business. I just was losing my interest in it and becoming obsessed with music. I was in 2 bands. I had a Nirvana cover band, and I had a original band that played my songs. And by the time I was 24, I had a full album written of my own songs, and it was fully conceptualized, from start to finish, super well thought out, every solo written, everything. And I couldn't get any of the guys in my town on board with my vision because they were all so much older than me. I was 22, 23, 24, and they were all in their 30s and 40s. So they were at a completely different place in life than me. They had kids, or they were committed to a career, and I was like, hey, let's make records and go on tour and make a music video. And they were like, whoa, dude, best I can do is practice once a week and play a show at a local brewery once in a while. And I was like, okay, well, this is not working for me. And so it became really clear that I had to get out of that town and go meet other people, or I wasn't going to find the band members that were going to make it work for me. And it came to the point where I was so frustrated with the food cart that I saw it as something that was holding me back from something that potentially greater, rock stardom. The only thing standing in the way of rock stardom is this stupid food cart. What I failed to appreciate is that my food cart business had been growing 50% every year. I really didn't appreciate what I had because I was so focused on what I could get, that what I had seemed completely irrelevant. And so when I was 24, I found buyers for the food cart, sold them everything, rights to the name, the menu, the actual trailer, everything, all the equipment. Then I bought a tour van, and I drove it to Seattle on my 25th birthday, the day of my 25th birthday. So I drove to Seattle, and I got there, and I just tried to start a band. And Seattle was super expensive, and after a little bit, I realized how much money I was spending, and I was like, whoa, this is not sustainable. What am I doing? And I drove back to Olympia, and while I was in Olympia, I looked up some jobs just cause, and there was a summer camp job that paid $20 an hour. And I was like, all right, I'll work at this summer camp. I got to get some more money in. So I worked at the summer camp and lived in my van. And living in your van in nature might be really fun. Living in your van in an urban environment, like in downtown Tacoma, is really not fun. I got woken up by the cops a lot. I got woken up by people banging on my window and saying, "Get out of here, you're on my yacht," because I didn't know where to park it. So I ended up in the Walmart parking lot a lot because that is the one acceptable place to park and sleep apparently. And that was no better either because that was no better. And I finally ended up moving into my girlfriend's dad's basement in Portland. Once I was in Portland, got on Craigslist, placed a really good ad with all the songs and demos and what I wanted, and I just made my vision very clear. This is the vision. Email me if you are interested in this exact thing. And I got emails from the guys that became my bass player and drummer, and one of them is still my drummer and producer to this day. I met up with them. They were equally ambitious, equally motivated to take music seriously. Because at this point, I was just so done with people who wanted to jam or people who wanted to start a little cover band or do this or that. I was like, no. We were trying to make it. If you're interested in trying to make it, this is what this is. If you're not, no problem. That's totally cool too, but this isn't that. Go do that somewhere else, right? So I just wanted to be really clear about what it was and what it wasn't. And because I was really clear, I got the right guys and practiced constantly. We played 2 shows a week. We were just all over. We played up and down I-5 from Seattle to Southern Oregon, all over Portland and Seattle, and we just did every single thing we could. And what I learned from doing that was that live music has changed to where most people will not go out and see a band unless they already are aware of that band from the internet. Unless they already know about it and listen to it online or on Spotify, they're not going to go out of their way to a bar to go watch that band. They're just, who's playing? I don't know them, I'm not going. That's kind of the way it's turned because everyone's got a trust thing because of the internet. Oh, it's probably not even real. Live shows, attendance is just down across the board for starters. Because, I mean, there's Netflix and there's social media and there's so many things to do where you don't even have to leave your house. So I realized live shows were not going to develop a following or an audience. We would play and there'd be 5, 7 people, maybe 20, maybe 30. But it just was not 1980 or 1990 when everybody was out looking for the next big thing all the time. And after a year and a half of playing all these shows and everything, I was starting to get frustrated again. This time I was frustrated that these 2 guys that I was married to, essentially, we were committed to this project together. I was frustrated that I was tied to them, and that stopped me from my other passion, which was travel. And I was like, oh, I can't travel because I've got this band, and I felt the same way towards the band after a year and a half that I had felt towards the food cart from stopping me from getting a band. So the food cart was stopping me from getting a band. A year and a half later, the band was stopping me from traveling the world. Very ironic, I know, because the food cart allowed me to travel the world. So I gave up the thing that allowed me to travel the world so that I could have a band, which then stopped me from traveling the world and made me super angry and frustrated. I'm a human. These are things humans do. So I decided that we were going to move to Australia, and I put together a PowerPoint presentation that I presented to the guys with, them edited onto a surfboard on a wave, and I'd made this whole presentation of Australia, the land of adventure, and I was pitching it like this exciting quest we were all going to go on as a band. And they basically looked at me and they were like, yeah, we have lives here, man. Like, we've got jobs and like he just got a girlfriend and we're not moving to Australia like because of this PowerPoint presentation. That's not what we're going to do. And I was like, oh man, okay. But to me, what I wasn't willing to do is I wasn't willing to do another year and a half copying the strategy that we had just proven was not going to work. Like we'd already done a year and a half of things that had proven themselves ineffective, and I was not interested in repeating that entire process again. I was like, well, I need to do something different because it clearly wasn't working. If you guys want to copy that same strategy and paste and repeat, please do, I'm moving to Australia. So I left them, and I was getting everything ready to Australia, packing, planning, got work visa for Australia, and then the pandemic hit and the world shut down. So we ended up not being able to move to Australia, and we moved to Mexico instead. And in Mexico, I just did so much research sitting in this hammock on what went wrong. Why was my avenue to success not successful? What is money? What is business? What am I doing? Like, how are all of these things? Why was Noodle Heaven successful and music not successful? And what I learned from the whole process was that, well, first of all, I went into a really competitive industry that is very difficult to make it in, and I chose a genre that is not thriving. Rock and roll is down since the 90s, in case you hadn't noticed. Maybe I would have been a little more successful in rap or hip hop or country or pop, but you got to follow your interests, and you got to follow what you're passionate about, and you don't want to be fake and, you know, pursue something that you don't love. So rock and roll was it for me, and that's what I wanted to do, so that's the direction I had to go. But I was naive about how easy it would be. I wasn't honest with myself about how difficult of a challenge I was taking on. And I think it's really important to be honest with yourself about what you're doing and be aware and understanding of the difficulty that you're setting yourself up for without tipping over into pessimism, right? Because a lot of people will be so aware and so understanding, and they just see all these obstacles that they argue themselves out of pursuing it before they even try. Like, oh, this is insurmountable. I'm not even going to try it. There's no way. And if you don't have the belief to just go for it on a hunch, you can end up with regret, right? And that's one thing that I can say for sure I won't have. I won't regret not going for it because I went for it. And I know for sure that it wasn't meant to be because it failed. And that doesn't hurt my feelings because I'm glad that at least I know for sure that I did everything possible to make my dream happen and it wasn't meant to be. And I have total clear conscience and I feel totally free in that because I put in every single ounce of effort that I could have, and I functioned on the best information I had at the time, and I just did every single thing I could have done. I was incredibly naive when I started. And it's embarrassing to look at this page in my notebook now, I had a record label designed of all the people that were going to have jobs based off of just my music. And that was such a naive thing to imagine because most artists, even, you know, young ones now watching, know that you have to do every job yourself. If you want to make movies, you're the scriptwriter, you're the director, you're the actor, you're the producer, you edit the footage, you market it, you advertise it, you're everything. You have to wear all the hats, right? Until you can afford to hire someone else to do the least important tasks. And that's just the way it works in art, but it took me a couple years to realize that. Something I want to mention is that I learned infinitely more from the failure of my music endeavor than I did from the success of my food cart and catering and events business. Because in the wake of that failure, I had to start fresh. I had to just clear the table and go, okay, everything I thought I knew might be wrong. I don't know which one of the things is wrong. All of it might be wrong. And that was when I went back to school and got my master's in global business. I was forced to accept that there was so much about business, money, and life in general that I just did not understand. So I'm glad that I gave up my successful business in order to pursue a crazy wild hunch. Because I learned so much more about business from a business failure than I did from a business success. And if I'd been tight-fisted on Noodle Heaven, like, oh, I can't give this up. I've spent 3 years building this, and if I give it up, I'll never have anything else ever again. If I'd been that way, the resentment and bitterness that I would feel would be directed at that business. It would be directed at the food carts because resentment and bitterness has to have an outlet. And I know that if I had not pursued music, I would feel regret and resentment and bitterness. And that resentment and bitterness would have been directed at my food cart or my food carts over a long enough timeline to now. And it would undermine that business. It would have undermined that business because I would have blamed that as the reason holding me back from what I wanted to pursue. So when you don't pursue something by choice, you still are going to blame something else. You still are going to blame the thing that held you back from doing it. That's what you're going to blame, because no one wants to blame themselves. So the resentment and bitterness has to find an outlet. This is why there's so many critics and so much negativity on the internet, is because resentment and bitterness has to find an outlet. And I know that my resentment towards my own potential artistic talent would have found a resentment outlet towards the business that held me back from doing it. So I'm glad that I sold my food cart and catering business and pursued something I was more passionate about, because it also set a pattern for me of following my gut instinct. And I think that's so important for entrepreneurs to do. They need to follow their gut instinct. They need to follow their gut instinct through success and through failure and not stop following it. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Applied knowledge combined with experience is the most power. And what I learned from the success of my first business, the failure of the next project, and then the reevaluation and re-education of myself, is that with each project, you integrate the lessons from the last one into the next one. So as you go forward, your likelihood of success increases because you're integrating lessons from project 1 into project 2. Project 2 fails. You integrate those lessons into number 3. Number 3's likelihood of success increases. Maybe that fails. Well, now project 4, you've increased the likelihood of success by adding lessons from 1, 2, and 3. With each new project, your likelihood of success increases because you're integrating lessons from more and more successes or failures. That's almost irrelevant. It's irrelevant where you succeed or fail. Just follow your gut instinct and take on the world in whatever way is meaningful and fulfilling to you. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that you got some value and some insight out of it. And if you have any questions or any comments on some other thing that I missed that I should have learned, feel free to drop it down in the comments. I'd love to engage about this story. I really would. Maybe you have a similar artistic journey, or you're in a place where you would like to take off on a similar artistic journey, but you're feeling hesitant. I'd love to talk to you about that. I would love to instill a small dose of practicality and business knowledge in artists, because I think they're so explosively creative, and I want to help them turn that explosive creativity into avenues that actually benefit their life. That's something I'm very passionate about. So thank you for listening to the story, and I will see you next time.
Go on an adventure, go